the hum of the vending machine, the buzz of the fluorescent light, the stillness of a place that's meant for people but sits empty after midnight. I used to think I was lucky getting the night shift cleaning contract for the old Johnson and Vale office building. The pay was better, fewer people around, no managers watching over my shoulder. Just silence and the smell of disinfectant. But there's something about silence that stops being peaceful after a while. It turns heavy. It breathes. The break room sat at the end of the east corridor, a small, square space tucked between the copy room and the HR office. Beige walls, tiled floor, a refrigerator that always smelled faintly of old lunches and reheated coffee. Every night, I'd finish the upper floors first, vacuuming the carpets, emptying the bins, then save the break room for last. It wasn't because I liked it. It was because I didn't. I always tried to push it off, the same way you push off an unpleasant chore you know you can't avoid. The first time I noticed it was on a Thursday night, or maybe Friday morning. I'd lost track of time by then. I remember how the air felt wrong when I walked in. Thicker somehow, like the room had been closed off for days even though it hadn't. My mop bucket squeaked across the tiles, the sound echoing too loud for such a small space. I could hear the vending machine humming against the far wall, the flickering light above it casting pale shadows that stretched and shrank with every pulse. And that's when I saw it, a shape sitting at the far corner table. At first, I thought someone had stayed late. The break room was dimly lit, just one bulb flickering in the ceiling, but the outline was clear. The curve of a shoulder, the slope of a head bent slightly forward, hands resting on the table. The figure didn't move. I froze in the doorway, unsure whether to speak or leave. I didn't want to disturb them. Maybe it was one of the accountants. Maybe they'd fallen asleep. But the room was cold, too cold for someone to be sitting comfortably. And when I blinked, the chair was empty. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks. Long shifts, dim lighting, tired mind. It made sense. Still, I worked faster that night, the kind of mechanical speed that comes from wanting to get out of somewhere. Every movement felt magnified. The swish of the mop, the clank of the trash can lid, the soft drip of water hitting the bucket. I didn't look toward the corner again. But from the reflection in the vending machine glass, I thought I saw it. A faint dark patch that didn't belong. The next week, I started avoiding that room altogether until the very end. Sometimes I'd even leave it undone, telling myself I'd clean it in the morning, but I never did. Then came the night when the smell changed. The building always had a sterile scent, lemon cleaner and stale air, but that night, something else mixed with it. Something faint, like burned coffee and metal. The kind of smell that clings to the back of your throat. I followed it down the corridor, my flashlight beam shaking slightly as I walked. When I opened the door to the break room, the light inside was off. The vending machine still hummed, but it sounded deeper somehow, as though it was vibrating through the walls. The smell was strongest near the corner. I thought maybe something had spilled, maybe old food or mold. But when I turned the flashlight there, it hit something that shouldn't have been there. A chair pulled out halfway, a shadow darker than the rest of the room. It didn't move, but I could feel it notice me. I know that doesn't make sense, but it's the only way to describe it. Like walking into a room where someone's been talking about you and suddenly they stop. That sudden, sharp awareness. The air tightens around you, the skin on your neck prickles, and you just know you're not alone. I stood there too long. The light from my flashlight trembled against the far wall, and the darkness seemed to push back against it, swallowing the edges of the beam. Then the vending machine made a sound, a sharp click, and the bulb inside flickered on by itself. For a brief second, the room filled with pale green light. In that light, I saw it clearly. The shadow wasn't cast on the wall. It was in it. A man-shaped void, darker than anything around it, hunched forward as if sitting at an invisible table. No details, no face, just the absence of light, pressed against the surface like something trapped beneath glass. And then it moved. Not fast, just a slow, deliberate turn of the head. toward me. I don't remember dropping the flashlight, but I must have because the beam swung wildly across the room and landed on the refrigerator. The magnet photos on it rattled softly, though there was no breeze. I backed out of the room and shut the door, hard enough that the frame rattled. For a few minutes, I just stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door. The hum of the vending machine buzzed faintly through it, steady and different. When I finally worked up the nerve to leave, I clocked out early. Told the supervisor the next day that I'd been sick. But that night stuck with me. Not just what I saw, but what it felt like. Because after that, things started to change in small ways. Every time I passed that end of the corridor, I could hear things, the soft scrape of a chair, the sound of liquid being poured, the faint clink of a spoon stirring something. Once, I thought I smelled fresh coffee, though the pot had been unplugged for hours. And sometimes, just before the lights in the hall flickered off at midnight, I'd catch a glimpse of something moving behind the glass door of the break room, a shape that shouldn't have been there, sitting, watching. Weeks went by. I tried not to think about it, but curiosity has a way of eating at fear. One night, near the end of my shift, I decided to check again, to prove to myself that nothing was there. The clock in the hallway read 2:03 a.m. Everything was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. When I reached the break room door, the light inside was already on. Dim, yellow, and unsteady. The vending machine's display blinked faintly, out of order. That wasn't new, it broke down all the time. But the chair in the corner wasn't empty. It was pulled slightly out, facing the door, and the faint shape of a figure sat there, perfectly still, perfectly silent. The outline was sharp this time. I could see the slope of its head, the curve of its back, like someone resting their elbows on the table, leaning forward. Except there was no table anymore. I'd seen the janitorial records. The old table had been thrown out 2 weeks earlier. So whatever it was sitting in front of nothing, staring at nothing, waiting. The light above flickered, humming louder, the bulb vibrating in its socket. The air thickened with that smell again, burnt coffee and metal. I took one step back, and the shadow's head twitched. Just slightly, enough to make me freeze. Then all the lights went out. The darkness was total. I couldn't see my own hands. The vending machine went silent, even the hum stopped. All I could hear was my own breathing. And then another. Slow, uneven breaths coming from inside the room. The sound of something shifting in a chair, fabric creaking, faint and close. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out everything else. I tried to step away, but my foot hit the mop bucket. The handle clattered to the floor. The breathing stopped. For a long, unbearable second, the silence pressed down on me. Then something dragged across the floor, a slow scrape, like a chair being pushed back. I didn't wait to see more. I ran. I don't even remember getting out of the building. The next thing I knew, I was outside, in the cold air of the parking lot, shaking so hard I could barely hold my keys. When I looked back through the glass doors, the lights inside the hallway had turned on again. Except one, the break room light. It stayed dark. I tried to quit the next morning. The supervisor didn't believe me, said the cameras in that section had been broken for months. He laughed when I told him what I saw, said maybe I needed a vacation. But there's something he didn't know. Something I saw later, when I went to grab my things from the janitor's closet. The window of the break room faces the inner courtyard, a small, empty space no one uses. From the hallway, you can see the reflection of the room in the glass. And as I passed by, just for a second, I looked. The room was empty, but there was a shadow sitting at the table. And in that reflection, it wasn't just watching, it was smiling. Even now, months later, I still think about that smell. I still hear the faint hum of the vending machine when I close my eyes. Sometimes late at night, when I'm cleaning another building, I catch a flicker of movement in the corner of a break room, and I freeze, wondering if it followed me. They say shadows can't exist without light, but I think this one never needed light at all. It just needed someone to notice it. And once you do, it never leaves you alone. I've worked in records management for nearly 20 years, and I can tell you one thing for certain. Paper doesn't move on its own. It doesn't climb out of cabinets or wander across hallways. It doesn't show up where it doesn't belong. At least, that's what I used to believe. The Johnson & Vale building had an entire floor dedicated to archives, a place most people in the company didn't even know existed. We called it the Vault, not because it stored anything valuable, but because it felt sealed off from the rest of the world. Concrete walls, metal shelves stacked high with boxes, the air heavy with the smell of paper and dust. The kind of room where sound didn't travel far. You could drop a box, and the echo would die before reaching the far end of the hall. My shift started at 5 in the afternoon, after everyone else had gone home. I preferred it that way. No interruptions, no chatter. Just the steady rhythm of sorting, logging, and labeling. I'd play the old radio near the desk sometimes, though it barely worked, a thin stream of static and whispers that blended with the hum of the fluorescent lights. Most of the files I handled were old personnel records, contracts, and correspondence from when the company was still using paper systems. A lot of them dated back to the 80s or 90s, judging by the yellowed pages and fading ink. I had a system, label, scan, store, and finally send the files to the sub-basement archive for permanent retention. One night, about halfway through my shift, I noticed a red folder sitting on my desk. It shouldn't have been there. The night before, I'd cleared every surface before leaving. My workspace was always immaculate, no stray papers, no misplaced boxes. The red folder stood out sharply against the gray desk, thick with documents, a little worn around the edges. The label on it read simply, Case 1472 Personnel. I don't remember ever cataloging that number. The handwriting was old-fashioned, written in black marker with faint smudges around the edges. The file itself felt oddly warm when I picked it up, as if it had been sitting near a heat source. The paper inside was stiff and slightly curled. I shrugged it off. Probably an old file someone pulled for review and forgot to return. I logged it, sealed it back up, and carried it to the sub-basement archive, the last stop for everything the company no longer needed but couldn't destroy. The basement always felt different from the rest of the building. Colder, for one thing. The air smelled faintly metallic, like wet concrete and rust. The overhead lights flickered every few minutes, leaving brief pockets of darkness that made the shelves seem to stretch endlessly into the distance. I stored the red folder near the back, in a section labeled Personnel 1400 to 1500. Then I locked the cabinet and went home. The next evening, the folder was on my desk again. Same label, same creased edges. At first, I thought maybe someone was messing with me. The guys upstairs had pulled pranks before. Nothing malicious, just the usual late shift boredom. But this was different. The archive keys were kept on my belt. No one else had access to that section after hours. I opened the folder this time. Inside were about a dozen sheets of paper, all blank except one. It was a personnel report, the company header, a typed name I didn't recognize, and a date from 1997. There was a photo attached, black and white, paper clipped to the top corner. It showed a man in his late 30s, seated, looking just off camera. His eyes were blurred slightly, as if the ink had run. The signature at the bottom was missing. The more I stared at the picture, the more something about it bothered me. The background was the same room I was sitting in now. Same shelves, same desk, even the same filing cabinet near the wall. It felt like looking into the past version of my own workspace. That night, I took the file back down again. I walked slower this time, flashlight in hand, the air thick with that basement chill. My boots echoed against the concrete, each step muffled by the weight of the darkness ahead. The hum of the lights seemed to fade as I went deeper, swallowed by the silence. I replaced the folder exactly where it had been, locked the cabinet, and even snapped a photo on my phone for proof. When I turned to leave, the temperature seemed to drop another few degrees. I could see faint fog when I breathed out. And then I heard it. The faint, crisp shuffle of paper. Not near me, farther down the aisle, beyond the reach of my flashlight, like someone was flipping through a stack of documents. Slowly, carefully. I froze. The sound continued for a few seconds more, then stopped. When I aimed the light down the aisle, there was nothing. Just rows of gray boxes stretching into the dark. I didn't bother to look further. I left the basement, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. When I returned the following night, the folder was waiting. Sitting dead center on my desk, as though someone had placed it there deliberately. The edges were damp now, faint water stains marking the corners. The paper inside smelled faintly of mildew. I opened it again, more out of dread than curiosity. The blank pages were still there, but one new sheet had been added. Another personnel form, different name, different date. And the photo this time. It was the same man, but his head was tilted slightly. The blur across his eyes was worse now, the ink running like tears down the paper. I stared at it too long. I don't know how much time passed before I noticed the faint reflection in the photo's background. Something that hadn't been there before, a dark figure standing near the shelves, just behind where the picture had been taken. That night, I decided I wouldn't go to the basement again. Instead, I sealed the folder in a cardboard storage box, taped it shut, and left it in the hallway outside the archive door. I told myself I'd deliver it to the main office in the morning. But when I came in the next day, the box was gone, and the folder was back on my desk. This time, the papers inside weren't blank. Lines of type filled the pages, but not in any language I recognized. The letters looked like English, but they didn't form words. Some were upside down, mirrored, as though copied by someone who didn't quite understand how letters worked. And at the bottom of every page, in small, neat handwriting, was the same sentence repeated over and over. File returned, location incorrect. I felt my skin crawl. I tried throwing it away. I really did. I put it in the shredder, but the blades jammed halfway through. The machine coughed, sputtered, and died completely, leaving the half-shredded folder wedged inside. When I pried it loose, the pages were whole again. After that, the noises began. Paper rustling when no one was there. Drawers opening on their own. A faint tapping, rhythmic, like someone drumming their fingers on a table deep inside the archive. Sometimes as I walked through the aisles, I could swear I heard footsteps pacing behind me. Slow, dragging, always keeping distance. The radio by my desk started acting up too. The static grew louder, sometimes cutting to silence for long stretches before whispering voices bled through. I could never make out the words, but the cadence felt deliberate, too human to be random interference. I stopped going in after dark, started taking earlier shifts, but it didn't help. The file still found me. Once, I came in after a weekend off and found it neatly placed on my keyboard, the pages open to a new photograph. It wasn't the man anymore. It was me. Taken from behind, bent over the desk, flashlight in hand. I looked exactly how I had 2 nights earlier, down in the basement. Even the clock on the wall matched the time I'd been there. That was when I tried to burn it. I took the file outside to the parking lot behind the building, doused it with lighter fluid, and struck a match. The paper caught quickly, flames curling through the edges, but as it burned, a low sound rose up, like the crackle of static through the air. My ears popped, the same way they do when pressure changes too fast. And then the fire died. Not slowly, all at once. The match went out, the flames vanished, and the folder lay untouched, only slightly singed at the corners. The red cover looked darker now, almost brown. I quit the following week. Told HR I'd found another job. They didn't ask questions. No one ever lasts long in archives anyway. Before leaving, I went down one last time, more out of resignation than courage. The basement felt different, emptier, quieter. I left the folder on the desk, turned off the light, and walked away. But when I reached the elevator, I noticed something. The light on the basement floor button was flickering. On, off, on, off. And faintly, beneath the hum of the machinery, I heard it again. Paper rustling. When I turned around, the door to the archive was slightly open. That was 6 months ago. I work somewhere else now, a smaller company, no basements, everything digital. But sometimes, when I open my locker in the morning, I smell that same mix of dust and metal. And last week, when I came back from lunch, there was a folder on my desk. Red, worn at the edges. The label read, Case 1473, Personnel. And inside, on the very first page, was a photo of my new office. Empty, except for one thing. A faint figure sitting in my chair.